Pil Crauer is a Swiss-German author and poet, a long-time contributor to EuroNews. He divides his time between Lucerne in Switzerland and Provence in France. 50 years after the signing of the Treaty of Rome, we wanted his views on Europe as a European intellectual, but not an EU citizen. He says a formal European constitution isn't necessary, and the question of institutional reform has been around for a long time.
Das wusste man hätte ja regeln müssen, damals als man zu 12 oder so.
We knew we had to have rules on how decisions were to be taken when the EU had 12 member states or 15. We knew about the need for reforms. That emerged during the German EU presidency and then during the French EU presidency. But during their presidencies, those two countries were more focused on their internal politics than on this important question. And now, since we don't have a formal constitution, when it comes to making important decisions on Europe in Europe, the EU ends up being tugged along by the latest pronouncements from the Kaczynski twins in Poland, or by the Polish Catholic radio station Radio Maria, or by the Pentagon.
Wenn wichtige Entscheide über Europa und in Europa gefasst werden.
You've said that Europe doesn't speak with one voice. I take it you're referring to foreign policy.
Jetzt haben wir ja diese Lage, dass Europa sich ja eigentlich
We find ourselves now in a situation where Europe sometimes appears rather ridiculous in terms of policy. For example, Italy under Berlusconi, Spain under Aznar. Their policies were rather pro-Washington, and of course there's Blair's Britain. And the Eastern Europe countries tended to follow the same line. I think there was a big misunderstanding. Eastern Europe didn't want to be part of the European Union. They wanted to be part of the United States of America. Naturally, they take European aid funds, but then, as we see, they use that money, like Poland, for example, to buy US planes.
There are two particularly important moments in the history of the European Union. The Treaty of Rome, and then when the countries of Eastern Europe joined the EU. The European reunification wasn't simply a misunderstanding.
Of course, the return of those Eastern European countries wasn't a misunderstanding. For example, Hungary. It's an absolutely European country. Its parliament held all their debates in Latin until 1918. You can't imagine a more European country. But the things we believed were not explained to them, and there was insufficient preparation for them joining. It should be clearly stated that Europe, the European Union, hands out a lot of money there, or pays for necessary developments, and in some way has lost sight of the practical approach there. And so I think that there are urgent and fundamental decisions to be taken, and we shouldn't be depending on non-European decision-makers when regulating European problems. That's what I want to say, and I'm concerned. I'm not saying it's bad. It's not that Europe is bad. It's that, unfortunately, there's a failed policy on these things.
Es ist nicht Europa ist schlecht. Die Politik hat einige Sachen verpasst und verschlafen, leider.
We've already said that for the EU, it's particularly difficult to follow a European foreign policy, for Europe to find a true role in the world. Some of the problems seem to be stemming from a radicalization of a particular debate.
Ich denke, Sie sprechen jetzt im Speziellen zum Beispiel vom Terrorismus.
I think you're talking particularly about terrorism, and to be fair, on this topic, that doesn't depend so much on what's decided in Brussels, but rather on the attitude of individual Europeans. And I am certainly concerned, seeing the religious fanaticism that generates much of the terrorism in the world. We don't have a properly thought-out answer to that question. What we've seen is that in recent years, the religious authorities in Europe have become more influential, and this concerns me.
verstärkt. Und das macht mir eigentlich Bedenken, dass man nicht überlegt, was
Not only do we not have a proper answer to religious extremism, instead of dialogue, we are simply stressing our European way, saying we're Europeans and our way of doing things is better.
Sowas ist viel besser als europäisch ist.
Coming back to the Treaty of Rome, it was a beginning, that's clear, a difficult beginning at a difficult time. The Second World War had recently ended, the dead were still being counted. But looking at it today, was it finally just a dream?
Europa hat sich mit diesen ewigen Kriegen selber kaputt gemacht.
Europe destroyed itself with these odious wars, and you really couldn't explain to people why they should want to shoot at each other without first turning them into fanatics.
Es war absolut notwendig. Ich denke nicht, dass es eine...
Since we're so similar and Europe is so small, the European Union was an absolute necessity. I don't think that it was a dream or a romantic idea. It was necessary. And today we need to turn it into something real and practical that produces results, so we can make decisions, not about everything, but on the important European questions.
Beschlüsse gefasst werden, nicht über alles und jenes, sondern über die wichtigen europäischen Sachen.